Coming up, IndigiPolitics this week looks at Washington updates. Part 3 of our series on climate change focuses on Native leadership. Plus, Joy Harjo reflects on challenges facing youth today, with wisdom of the elders. And just what were those Native stars wearing at the Met Gala? Join us for those features and more, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Mitakiapi, Ampetu Washte. Thanks for joining us. I'm Shirley Snavy, in for Aaliyah Chavez. We start in California, where tribes are welcoming the expansion of 2 national monuments. ICT's Pauly Denetclaw has more.
The 2 monuments are nearly 120,000 acres larger after President Biden signed a proclamation using his powers under the Antiquities Act. The newly protected lands are in the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument in Southern California and the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument in the north. The expansion moves have long been championed by area tribes.
You hear about, acknowledgement of sovereign nations and consultation, government to government, and this is exactly an end product of that consultation with tribes and tribal input on this proclamation. So very, very proud moment for not just our tribe, but all tribes who are able to participate in government-to-government consultation.
The monuments were originally established by President Barack Obama, and tribal leaders say they are happy to see the borders grow, especially given the history of shrinking tribal lands.
We used to have the 7.4 million acres of land, which was taken away from us and left us with only 640 acres where we're at today. So doing what we can with the monument and getting more land, it's a great thing. It's a great thing. It's all ancestral lands.
And the expansion, Native leaders say, benefits everyone.
This isn't the end. This might be the end of this one phase of the battle, but there's still many more to go. And hopefully tribes will continue to fight for their right as sovereign Indian nations. And, for the rest of the world, we're here, we're fighting the same things for climate, for ecology and all the different things that come with doing stuff like this. So definitely a good day.
Pauly Denetclaw, ICT News.
We'll have more on these expanded national monuments in our IndigiPolitics feature later on in the newscast. Well, one of the biggest New York nights showcased incredible Native fashion. This year, the Met Gala's green carpet was graced by model Quinault Chasing Horse and actress Lily Gladstone. With the Garden of Time being the theme, Quinault's blue dress bloomed like a flower, complemented by her caribou tufted accessories. Lily wore a glittering black gown by Gabriella Hearst, paying homage with 2 braids for the late Cole Bringsplenty, who would have graduated from Haskell this year.
Gabriella worked with an artist named Carrie Atumbai from the Quinault Nation. She's a metal worker. She did all of my adornment, my rings, earrings, the custom in the back. And the concept was something that, you talked about how the 2 of them were on the same wavelength the whole time. We wanted me to feel draped in the power of my ancestors. And for both Kiowa and Blackfeet, our ancestors are the stars. That's where we come from. We all are sky beings that came to Earth, and that's where we return when we leave, and we rejoin our ancestors on the Milky Way.
Last week, President Joe Biden signed a proclamation to expand 2 national monuments in California. And this week, over 100 tribal leaders are in Washington, D.C. to testify before the House Appropriations Committee. And we get an update on the Farm Bill. We turn now to regular contributor Holly Cook Macarro. She's a principal at The Angle for this week's IndigiPolitics. Welcome back to the newscast, Holly.
Sorry about that. Hi, Pauly. It's good to see you.
So first, Can you tell us a little bit about the history of tribes and their advocacy for these two national monuments?
Sure. In particular, and with the designation of the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, which is in Northern California, kind of north of San Francisco, near Napa. For everyone's reference, it's home to several Quinault nations. They honor the Patwin there. There's a rich history of tribal communities and protecting that range there. NCAI has a resolution in support of that designation and expansion. And this is a very important accomplishment for both the tribes there and the administration.
Biden expanded both of these national monuments significantly, and he did it through the Antiquities Act. Can you tell us a little bit more about how presidents utilize this act?
It's not a heavily utilized power of the president. I think this is the 18th time it's been utilized. And I actually was looking through just maybe for the fourth or fifth time that President Biden has used it. It's a way to protect these lands when there are, maybe no other opportunities available in terms of finding consensus from Congress or doing those designations. So the Antiquities Act is an important power of the president, but one that has been used conservatively and judiciously over the history of the country, in fact.
This week, tribal leaders are in Washington, D.C. testifying before the House Appropriations Committee. Can you tell us more about this?
Sure. This week is always such a busy one on the Hill. The Interior Appropriations Bill, as we all know, is home to the funding source for the majority of tribal programs and the Indian Health Service across the board. And so as the appropriators begin putting together the funding for these tribal programs, tribal leaders submit a request to testify. They're chosen. I believe there's approximately 140 that are in town yesterday and today. They provide 5 minutes of written testimony, of spoken testimony to members of the Appropriations Committee. It's a really critical part of the process in expressing tribal priorities and what is working in Indian country, what is not working, where funds could be better directed, and in building those relationships with the members of the Appropriations Committee who may not be familiar with every single program on the ground. So this back and forth over these 2 days has an impact, an almost immediate impact on what funding for tribal programs looks like in the next fiscal year.
And can you talk a little bit about the difference that it makes when tribal leaders do come and testify before Congress and the House Appropriation Committees on these key funding?
It's in both an educational process, I think, and for like I said, if there are programs, take, for instance, the Tawahe Initiative, which started with 10 tribes and has been expanding over the last decade. And really, it's an opportunity to vocalize and demonstrate the success of individual programs on the ground and ways that self-governance programs, governance programs work, other initiatives, and where there's great need, or to put forth new ideas. And so these tribal leaders come in and really there's copious notes taken by appropriations staff and by the actual members who sit through these 2 days and listen to the testimony from the tribal leaders. This is grassroots testimony about what is working on the ground in our reservation communities. And so the impact is huge.
There was a hiccup last year in reauthorizing the Farm Bill. So can you tell us about where that sits right now?
And it's kind of a regular hiccup, right? With the Farm Bill having to be reauthorized every 5 years. It expired last September, and in what has become somewhat of a regular process, the The authorization was extended 1 year as part of the appropriations package that went through. There's been a lot of work in Indian country. There's a coalition with great advocacy leadership that meets regularly, weekly, to analyze the different provisions in the bills. Everyone has been waiting for is what we call the section by section, which summarizes what each chamber's version of the bill is going to look like. And last Wednesday, each chamber finally released those. And so now, as it really gives us a sense of what each chamber is going to come out with and where Indian country's work needs to be done. There's been a real push for letters from Indian country into the Department of Agriculture in order to expand the self-governance program there. There is the Farm Bill is where our commodities program, which is called the Food Distribution Program on Indian Reservations, or for short, FDIPR. And one of my more favorite acronyms in Washington, D.C. But so if you're looking for your commods, make sure you're asking your tribal leaders to weigh in support of the expansion of self-governance and also in support of the tribal provisions that we are all advocating for in the Farm Bill.
What are some of the things that tribal leaders and advocates are saying about the Farm Bill?
Well, we know there's going to be, there's always disagreement on funding levels, on reauthorization of specific programs. Indian country is not usually caught up in those. And as we often talk about, Indian country issues are bipartisan. We usually have bipartisan support for these programs. And I expect that to proceed as well. We need to make our voices heard, like I said, on the expansion of self-governance, and a few other initiatives that we can delve into the weeds to. I know you've covered this a few times already. What I don't expect to see, and what is not happening right now, is some of those larger policy issue riders that we've seen bog down some of these big bills. If that happens, I expect, and what intel I'm hearing is that would happen more towards the end of the consideration on a floor consideration. But right now, we finally see some movement on getting this done. It's a short calendar between now and the election, but with the release of the section by sections, everyone is hopeful that this reauthorization gets done by the end of the year.
Well, that's all the time that we have, Holly. Thank you so much for joining the newscast.
Thank you, Pauly. It's good to see you.
Indigenous values, respect for ancestors, grandmother Earth, and future generations. They guide us in everything, including in our response to climate change. Our Mark Trahant is here with part 3 of his reporting from the Quinault Nation in Washington as it faces pressure from the sea. Tell us more about that, Mark.
Thank you, Aaliyah. The rising ocean is forcing the Quinault Nation to abandon ancestral villages, but not its traditional ways or its values.
Many of our ancestors have told of that day of reckoning when it's going to be red nations rising and our people leading the rest of the world. And we are that beacon of light. Many try to extinguish our light, assimilate us, terminate us. But that light is so strong that spiritual strength, knowledge, and wisdom that we have carried for centuries has never left us. We are right there, and we're going to lead the rest of the world through this crisis.
The climate story is as much about values as it is a changing planet. It's easy to see the connection between the Quinault people and their place in this world.
We're a fishing people here. We lived off the land, ocean, river ecosystems. Our villages were seasonal. We would move as the land changed, or as the weather changed, or as our needs arose. And until we kind of adopt this kind of new mindset and think about how we could best set up future generations for success, going to take a total value reset from society. And I think what you're seeing happen in all sectors, even from a science perspective, Indigenous values and teachings are finally getting centered and put in that limelight, because that paradigm shift the rest of society has to do. Indigenous and Native people are already doing that. And this common teaching that we're borrowing, this earth and this land, this reality from future generations. We all have a sacred duty to leave the world better than we found it. That's universal.
The demographics of tribal communities are young, and that's a number that reflects the age of our people. But beyond that, there is a remarkable talent showing from Indigenous young people. This is important because in addition to the challenges of climate change, there are new opportunities, like those for jobs that do not yet exist.
I love talking about the opportunities for young people and really the opportunities for our country when we engage with young people and get them involved. The president hosted a tribal youth summit last fall, and I had the opportunity to attend that and sit at the table with some young leaders from across Indian country. And I was really impressed. And in fact, I told one of the groups I was talking with that if I were put in a position of competing with them for jobs and opportunities out of college, I never would have measured up, because a lot of young people from across Indian country, they are pushing doors open that Indian people haven't had open for a long time, and they're so talented, and they're not accepting the status quo or the old way of doing things. And that's the other thing that makes me really hopeful. I'm just really impressed by the talent that's out there across Indian country in terms of young people, and excited to see what it's going to do for all of us.
Lovey Law Smith, Quinault Indian Nation, is a 9th grader at Tahola School District. She's been to New York, where she talked to delegates at the United Nations about what it means to move her tribe's village.
It's a little odd just to know that there's going to be like a new town just right here. I live up the hill, so I'm not really located down there, but I do think that it's a lot better for us just as our people, because like we're literally right on the ocean, right there. And like even just like king tides, the ocean already comes up and hits their houses, and that's already doing something.
And it's values that drives this conversation.
Any climate policy initiative will fail or be fundamentally flawed without Native people at the table in a meaningful way. This whole transition to, a green energy framework or a green energy grid, for us, some in Indian country have started calling it green colonialism, because these projects, which sound good, big hydrogen hubs or offshore wind, they have significant impacts to the environment, and just the scale, the footprint, the impacts to water, to air, all of that. There's a cost, and a lot of times it's right on top of a sacred site, or it's right on top of a very significant area of cultural interest, or will significantly impact a native way of life. Unless we are at the table to give that perspective and be able to have decision-making authority, these projects are always going to be flawed.
One part of the values discussion at Quinault involves land back. This year, the Washington legislature appropriated $25 million so that the Quinault Nation could preserve old-growth forest land. That land will be used as a carbon sink, an offset reducing the region's overall greenhouse gas emissions, not to mention protecting an inherent value, land, so important to Quinault.
Our identity and existence is indivisible from the land and territory that we steward, and the blueback being the center to that, they're a keystone species. So many other species, plant life, ecosystems would collapse if that species was allowed to be wiped off the face of the earth. And we don't see a future of our nation if that stock and that salmon species isn't protected and thriving. These are all things that I think about, when we hear about, these record investments, or when I have an outside actor come in here and tell me, this is good, this is good for you. And it's just, I see a trend, and I've heard that before. You've told us this is good, but it's, the proof is in the black and white, and the devil's in the details.
Mark, it's so interesting how land back is one of the values that's so important, and that's something that all of us know. But I understand that this is tricky, is that right?
It is tricky, and land back is so important to climate change, especially in this case. There's a piece of old growth forest that the Washington legislature has budgeted $25 million for, and now it's literally on the ballot. If voters reject the climate fund in Washington state, they could take away that land that's now budgeted. And it's important for climate change because it acts as a carbon sink. It's money, you can use it to reduce the overall greenhouse gas emissions. But to the Quinault people, it means much more than that.
Mark, thank you so much. If you missed any part of this series, you can catch up on ICTnews.org or on our YouTube channel for the full story on the Quinault's journey in this era of climate change.
Joy Harjo has won the hearts and minds of folks from all over the globe with her words and music. From poetry, children's books, and music, she's a true artist and philosopher whose works reflects her Muskogee heritage. Joy Harjo was our 23rd Poet Laureate. She's also a saxophone player, as well as a mother and grandmother. I asked her what issues face Native people in the world today.
The one that's intimate and up close in our community and family is really the young people. And of course language is part of that, but also how we transmit stories or how we transmit culture when everyone is on their cell phones and everyone is on their computers. It's strange. It's like my son works for the railroad in New Mexico, and he was mentoring a young worker who came to work for the railroad, and the young man couldn't believe, he says, you used to have to look up phone numbers in phone books or memorize them, and he couldn't believe that, that we had to do that, or his generation, and he's younger than, as my son, and then he says, we don't go to anyone's houses. We just talk, we just text. And we can play games at a distance. It's shocking, really, and yet it's a different kind of reality. So somehow we have to find a way, a go-between, a way so that they don't lose, that our children don't lose the connection with who they are as human beings in a living world versus a world that it's created by people, by creators of manipulators. It's created by manipulators of digital and other media, and now AI. We have the usual issues that we've always had, as Native people, and in lands that have been, stolen or corrupted or environmentally disturbed. We're at a crisis, in so many ways, especially environmentally and culturally even. But the young people and the children, that's very concerning because we are stories. They are our stories. They're the continuance of our stories. And what stories are feeding them? Are they nourishing them, or are they being fed processed stories?
Joy's daughter died from cancer in December. I asked her how she was dealing with grief.
Rainy Dawn Ortiz, beautiful artist. I think of things, I still share with her, I still share things on Facebook. I thought about calling. I know one of the kids has her phone, but I text her. I still text her sometimes and write her notes. One thing I've learned is that it's really a living field that we're in. I started to see that with my first granddaughter, who is 33 now, and working for National Indian Youth Council, Krista Chico. But I started, and is that it's really a living field, and they're still here. There's still a presence. Even my daughter, she's gone on, because as we know, some people don't want, you get too attached, but it's a living field, and it's a timeless field. And that helps with the grieving. It makes me realize how the ghost dance came about, too, because, they're here, and sometimes we touch in and see or feel, or we know them. They help. If you ask for it, you know, they help us. Although there were ones that didn't. Don't. That's why I always say, don't call in all your ancestors, because some of them were not helpful when they were here, and they're not going to be helpful. We come here to learn, and we learn by the way that we hard-headed humans often learn is by challenge and suffering. We grow muscle. That's how we grow our spiritual muscle. But man, some of the tests, you know what helped me one time is somebody said, and I don't remember who it was an elder, native, who said that those who can do it or have the Creator trusts or loves will be most tested. If they know you can pass it, if they know that you have it in you to go to those levels, you will be tested. And I thought, wow, Native peoples, we're tremendously loved. The Creator loves us because we have been tested at times beyond what we could carry.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.